Psychology is the new firewall, where human psychology every trick. We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behaviors so you won't click. No complicated code, just tried and true brain science at play. Social engineering for good, the best defense is in your mind today.
Welcome to Phishing for Answers. The opinions expressed here are solely those of the individuals involved and do not reflect the views of their employers. Get ready, because the next live episode of Phishing for Answers is starting right now with your host, Joshua Crumbaugh, the CEO of Phish Firewall.
Psychology is the new firewall, where human insight trumps every trick. We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behavior so you won't click.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Phishing for Answers. Today we're here with Frank Sweeney, the CIO of the Arizona Department of Child Safety. Frank, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me here. I spent about 20 some years in private sector, doing startups and corporate IT. And then I moved into the public sector about 11 years ago. So I've been in government about 11, almost 12 years now.
And what got you into technology to begin with? What was the draw?
Wow. It was actually by happenstance. I actually wanted to be a history professor. And so I was working with a person in Chicago that was going to start a company out in Chandler, Arizona back in the early 90s. And he said, I'm starting a .com company. And would you be interested in working with me? And I'm like, I have no idea what a .com company is. But sure, my mom lives out in Arizona. I would love to come out there. So I came out here and started a .com with him. And it turned out the company was the first company to actually put credit cards online. And so from then on, I've been in IT almost 31 years now. So it was kind of by sheer accident that I get into IT.
Well, that's cool. For me, I loved technology, and so I wanted to know everything about it, and so it just came naturally. Although cybersecurity was a little bit different. That I didn't know there was a career in it. So once I learned I could hack legally, I was like, "Yeah, sign me up! Come on, I'm in." So, well, very cool. So tell me a little bit about just your thoughts on the human element of cybersecurity and just the problem itself, as well as maybe some thoughts on tips on how you can best mitigate that threat.
Sure. What I'm going to say is not going to be anything that anybody else is not going to say. I think the nuance, what I'm going to say may be that I think that there's a lot more humanness in the cybersecurity than the technology side of it. So when I say humanist, is that I think most of the security breaches or most of the security threats that we have to do with the culture that we create within our organizations on security. It is not exclusive to cybersecurity individuals. Every person has a responsibility to take actions or prevent actions that they're doing, or to get good grooming, what we call grooming habits, basically habits that are privacy orientated when they go to work, when they're dealing with personal information. So I think most of the security threats happen on the human side, changing that culture, making the culture understand that we're all in it together. Every single person, every human that comes in to work or is virtual has a responsibility to make sure that they're taking care of personal identifiable information correctly. And if there's any privacy, to make sure that they're ultra private with what they're doing. And so, you can have all these cool new gadgets like AI and all these things that this cyber criminals are using now, but it still comes down to someone pushing a button.
It does more often than not, and I mean, and even that's how they bypass our MFA. It's somebody pushing a button, and most often clicking authorize at
Right.
that. Well, tell me a little bit. So let's flip to AI. I love the subject of AI because there's cool, extraordinary things happening in that space every single day. Let's just start there. What's some of the cool stuff that you're excited about as it pertains to AI?
Well, for a defense and a proactive, there's two ways of looking at the cybersecurity for us. I think AI is fantastic for not only being reactive, in other words, going through log files and seeing what is relevant errors that we should be paying attention to in your server log files. But also, it can be a very proactive tool where you're going out and actually planning different types of scenarios for your team and your agency to play against your network to see the weaknesses that you currently have versus waiting until someone else actually does that, which is always bad when you're in that situation, and trying to find weaknesses that you may or may not have thought about. So that's really exciting to us. We use both methods. We use the proactive method of creating scenarios within our own department of potential attacks, playing those out, and analyzing how we're responding to those, as well as looking through log files that we currently get on a daily basis from the network and seeing where the areas we should be paying attention, what messages should we be paying attention to, and AI does a marvelous job on that. I'll just give you an example. Log files accumulate by the minute, by the second. We're talking about 5-6 million a day. AI can go through that and pinpoint what we should actually be paying attention to within all those messages in minutes versus if you have a professional that's looking at these log files every single day, there's no way they can find out which ones they should be paying attention to. You would think, well, everything is good. No, you don't want to look at everything and say everything we should be looking at. No, we need to look at what's actually serious. What is a serious threat for us?
How do we make sense of it? How do we find and prioritize the data that is most critical? One of the areas that I'm excited about AI is DLP.
Oh, yeah.
It's been one of those problem aspects of cybersecurity since as long as I can remember. You can deploy a DLP solution, but you're going to get either too few of alerts or too many alerts. But it's very, very difficult to get those things tuned in. And then the other part is, even if you do get them tuned in, now you have the aspect of making sure that they actually understand what your data is, what data is sensitive, how to understand what data is sensitive. And that in and of itself is a whole different challenge. And so I'm optimistic that AI will provide some solutions there for dynamically identifying sensitive data, dealing with unstructured data a little bit better and getting it structured and different things like
100%. Data loss prevention is a huge aspect. I think AI can really make inroads.
I agree. So the other side of this, of course, is AI-driven attacks. Now, I see what I can only define as AI-driven attacks every day. But maybe there's a little bit of hyperbole there because it looks like them, and maybe I'm assuming. What do you think? I mean, you must see attacks hitting your organization. Have you seen anything that you would deem as AI?
Absolutely. I think the AI deepfakes are going to be more prevalent in the future, if not the major one besides phishing, the old phishing attacks, right? The sophistication of the phishing attack by AI bots now is unbelievable. They look identical. They remove the from email and manifest it and cloak it into the email that you would expect from someone that you're expecting a message from.
Mhm.
But the deepfake AI is really is the one that concerns me the
Good.
most, because these actually can change voices, so you can get voicemails, so you can get some phishing calls that are exactly like your mother's voice, your father's voice, or someone like your superior, your boss's voice, asking you to do things that you would normally just say yes to. And there, if you see some of these
Yeah.
things, they're identical to what you would hear from a boss or your family member. So I think those are they're going to be on the upswing.
Absolutely. And I've already spoken to multiple CIOs and CISOs that have already seen deep fakes in the wild targeting their organizations. So I think deep fakes, we're only just barely beginning to see them, and they've already created a great deal of devastation. So I think it's going to get worse. But going back to what you said earlier, talking about how we have to really drive a more security aware culture, a culture where people understand that security is part of their job. If we want to do that, I think that's the only way that we're able to really deal with deep
Right?
fakes. Um, because at the end of the day, I don't see us being able to identify deep fakes with a
No, I don't
technology,
think
not
no,
for long.
I don't either. There's too sophisticated, and the thing that scares me the most about the deep fakes are that once we get to a point where you can't even tell the difference, which is almost
Yeah.
there. I mean, and this is just the beginning of the AI. Then what countermeasure can you have to identify these?
Yeah, and think about people like, well, myself. I'm online all the time. I have this podcast. I do other events online. It would be so easy for somebody to change something. And to that regard, do you remember everything you've said? Because if there's hundreds of hours of you talking out there, they could make something up, and it'd be hard for even for the person themselves to know 100% whether or not they actually said
That
that.
scares me the most.
That's one
That
of
scares me the most because your
yeah,
reputation is everything, right?
it is, yeah, and I mean, we see it right now. I mean, now it's playing out more only with, on the reputational side. We only really see that type of stuff with, like, big political figures around the world, but we are already seeing it where, you know, you've got this video and people saying, "Well, that must be a deep fake," and so, um, I think it's only going to continue to get worse. Talked to one place, they had a call center, and over the phone, they're already seeing almost daily deep fakes that are using people's voice. Zoom calls are a little bit less common, but I saw a technology come out, I want to say about a month ago. It's an open source framework that allows you to create deep fakes, and it's brilliant. I mean, this tool is better than any of the paid tools out on the market, and it's open source. I can install it today
Very
and
scary,
create
very
a deep
scary,
fake.
very scary. Especially being in the public sector,
It is.
because the public sector has less resources to deal with this. So we have to band together, all the time. So all the agencies work
Yeah,
really, really tight with each other as far as enterprise security.
yeah. I've seen that before. We've had the ISACA before. They blocked one of our domains, and instantly we get all of these tickets coming in from cities all across the country. I mean, just like almost like clockwork. They blocked it, and all of a sudden everyone starts complaining and saying it's broken. But that is how it needs to be, and I was impressed by that, and that's what I wanna see, is that if something happens with your org, that knowledge and those indicators of attack, they get spread
Zero trust. As much as
Exactly.
I hate that, so
Like
as I get older, I hate those types of scenarios because that means I have to do a lot more clicking and stuff. But there is a
that's
place
fair.
for it, and I think now it's just so critical now with all the advancement.
Yeah, and you maybe don't have to do that much clicking. I had, ChatGPT's operator, I logged it into my website's admin portal, and I just told it to go and do a bunch of SEO stuff. And it was doing it all on it. I mean, it's navigating, you're watching the mouse move around on the screen, you're watching it type.
That's
I don't
pretty.
know. Won't be too
No,
long.
not too long. Not too long.
Yeah. Okay, so back to deep fakes. What's your advice on defending against it?
Wow, that's a tough one. I don't know if I have advice. I have some ideas of just making sure that you understand when someone's calling to ask more questions. I mean, a deep fake can only work is if you are willing to ask the questions that maybe are kind of weird to someone that you may or may not know. But you need to do that as a one step further, because I've seen or I've heard people thwart a lot of just generic deep fakes by just asking 2 or 3 extra questions that only that person would know. What would be it that would be my suggestion, is making sure that whoever is providing you information over the phone, to make sure that you're doing your due diligence to make sure that you are deeming that person by some uniqueness that they only know through what you know of them. So, but other than that, we're going to have to figure this out. You know,
I think policy and procedure can help a lot there
sure.
too. Just like basic things. Like if we're going to send a wire, these, 3 people have to sign
Right.
off on it. Or we're never going to do a wire outside of business hours. We're never going to ask you to send a wire out.
I think there's
And empower your people to say no, I think, as well, because most often
Well, I think there's some common sense too, but I think you led into something that's super important. And I think we mentioned it right in the beginning, and we didn't call it what we should have called it, is the culture change. Just realizing that when you're at home working and you're getting the same types of calls that you would at home as you would at work, that there shouldn't be any difference. Like, as if you're very paranoid about solicitors calling you at home, you should be equally paranoid in people calling you on your work phone at home. And so I think that culture of understanding that the same types of things that you would do for yourself to protect yourself, you should be always on the lookout for that. I don't think anybody's going to get fired when you say, "Are you really my boss?" Is this really, you really want me to deposit how much money in what account? Why would I do that? And then following it up, what you just said is so true, is the policy and procedure. But again, it goes back to having that culture of people understanding that we're all in this together. It's not the cybersecurity department at your work.
And I'll add to that, if people are afraid to say no to the boss and that's your culture, you are setting yourself up for a successful
Big
wire
time.
fraud attack or gift card scam or whatever it happens to be. And I mean, to that point, gift card scams still work to this day. So we clearly haven't done a good enough job of getting the word out that if there's a gift card involved, it is malicious. I read this study, and I'm curious what you think of it. But there was this school out of South Florida that they were researching the different types of users and what people did when they got a suspicious link. And a lot of users would delete, some would report. But what they discovered was that there was this group of users that would actually forward it to their work email and open it there because they thought it was so secure at work that they couldn't possibly get hacked. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think that's a nightmare, first of all.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah, that's a nightmare.
Valid.
I think, again, it goes back to like how you approach the cybersecurity, and going back to everything we said so far, is building that culture of understanding that, a phishing attack, how you react to a phishing attack or a potential threat at home, when you're at home dealing with your own personal information, you should be thinking the same way, and not thinking that the work has some magic bullet to save you. I just don't think I think it's a cultural thing, and making everybody understand that they're all a part of it, just like we've been saying in this whole.
And if they know their role, they're gonna know that the company is not so
Right.
secure that they couldn't get hacked.
This training
So
too.
I
We do outreach in our training in our department where we go to on the road and talk about these things, what we should do when things happen. So it's all a part of that too. It's a part of the education, but I lump that all into culture, right? So culture awareness, situational awareness of you're at home versus you're at work. It should be no difference if you're working. All those types of things are educational, but they're all kind of lumped into culture, right, of security.
makes sense. So let's pivot a little bit here, but I think it's still very related, at least on culture, and that is if you really only had one that you could use, carrot or stick, which would you choose and why?
I would use the carrot. I think the stick is. I think the stick does the exact opposite of what you're trying to do with the stick. I think it makes people not talk. And as far as I'm concerned, cybersecurity, the number one reason why we have so many problems is we don't talk enough. We don't disclose enough about what's happening in an email or something that they see. They're afraid to say something. That fear of saying nothing is caused by the stick versus the carrot. So we spend an awful lot of time in our agency making sure people understand that you are our hero. You're the one that's the first line of defense. If you see something, please say something. And so
Yeah.
that culture has thwarted many different smaller phishing attacks because at the state, we always get phishing attacks in some level just because they are so comfortable saying, oh my gosh, I just clicked something. I'm turning my computer off. I'm doing this. They don't feel there's retribution for something that they made a mistake. The mistake is not saying anything for days or saying anything,
Agreed.
Immediately, if you make mistakes, no problem. No one's getting. There's no retribution for that. In fact, we make them heroes when we hear somebody like that. And so, yeah, definitely the carrot is way better with cybersecurity than anything else.
I completely agree. I think that when you're punitive, people are not only just not likely to reach out to you to tell you about their concerns, to tell you when they're worried about something, but there's studies that talk about how in punitive work environments, how people's or a typical growth mindset will actually turn into a fixed
Right.
mindset. And what that means is your people are less creative, they're less innovative, they're less able to do their job. And I don't think that IT or information security should be impacting the broader business to that degree. I think one of the most critical things that I guess, rephrase that. The most critical aspect of our job is business enablement. Yes, we help to manage risk and all of that, and that's a very important element. But if we only see it as managing risk and we're only ever blocking and never enabling, we become the enemy as opposed to the ally. And I know a lot of particularly cybersecurity leaders, but really all the technology leaders I talk to are that's one of the things that they're emphasizing more than I've ever heard in previous years is that it's business first, and that's what has to be.
And what we say is mission first is the mission of what we
Fair.
do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because it's not always business. You're right. With you, it very much is a mission. It's not dollars and cents. It's children's
Right.
lives.
I
Okay.
like the enablement,
Um.
though. That's exactly what we say here too. Enabling.
Absolutely. So pivoting a little bit, one of the topics that I like to I guess bring up often is role-based training. So when I look around an organization, I see a lot of different needs for specialized training, particularly around security. Take developers, take your IT teams, take your finance departments. Um, what roles do you think are most critical when it comes to role-based training?
Well, I would say obviously the one that comes to mind is any role that is associated with child information as the main data
Makes
moving
sense.
around with child information. And in child welfare, we also have other roles that are associated with investigation work, which is even more, I would say, more sensitive data than just child information, because there's basic child information and then there's investigative, where there's serious potential information that you would not want anybody in the public that could damage someone that was under 18, which is we have federal laws for disclosure of that information. So those roles are very serious in child welfare. And so the roles that are associated with those jobs have to be really, really identified on what information is being viewed and how information can be closed off immediately if a person leaves the agency or that role.
Makes sense. Okay, so anyone with sensitive access well, rather access to sensitive information, makes perfect sense. I'm curious, do you have compliance requirements around that, or just like
We
state
have
law?
several. I could probably go on and on because we're one of the few states that also have health care for our children. So
Okay.
we have HIPAA,
Oh, so you have HIPAA
we
too.
have everything. We have FERPA, we have state laws that are associated. We have Social Security Administration laws. We're audited by 5 or 6 different agencies, including our state agencies, every single year. So we're under
Oh,
tremendous microscope to make sure we do the right things.
so your security leader I mean, that a large portion of their job must be compliance and
100%.
audits.
Yeah, I would say a good portion of our leadership in cybersecurity, which we have a great team. Our CISO is Lindy Ho. She's an amazing individual, and her team does a fantastic job of keeping things moving in the right direction and also responding to all of our compliance requirements.
Makes sense. So what about the social aspect of IT leadership? This is one of the things that fascinates me when I look at your typical CIO or CISO. They tend to be, or really, they have to be very social, very outgoing people. Whereas your CFO can get away with being antisocial if they want to. I don't see that being the case for a CIO. What's your thought on
Surprisingly, I'm going to kind of blow the doors off of the myth. Most CIOs that I know are very introverted. Uh, the reason why they look extroverted is because it's a part of their job. So right now, me talking to you is something that I would not do as an enjoyment, right?
that?
I would do something
I won't take offense,
I
I
wouldn't do it, but
suppose.
most of us wouldn't. It's a
Yeah,
requirement for our job to make sure that we're promoting the goodness of our agencies and all the good work that we're doing for children with regards to supporting the mission, right? So it's part of our jobs to be social. But I wouldn't think that most of us, if you actually got them in a room and said that if there's one thing you didn't have to do for your job, I think most of us would say not to be social, because I would rather be
I
yeah,
would.
I would rather be reading about AI every day and reading all my articles online that I read, that are really neat, neat studies about AI and the brain and whatever is going in the medical field and all that. But we have to be that way because our job is required in public service.
Agreed. Well, I don't think it's just even public service. I think just the job in general. I mean, you have to be out there talking to people, whether it's on the CIO side of things, just understanding the needs and the function of the different departments and how they have to work, or it's on the CISO side of things and understanding the risks of each one of these different departments and how they're actually handling data, how they're working with the data. All of those things potentially impact risk at the end of the day, and it's those conversations that maybe you don't want to have, that get you that data and that help you learn those
Right.
things.
And I always think the thing that really, if something really bothers me the most, is that when the perception of us, of the CIO position, is somewhat of, well, they just kind of, direct things and they kind of move things in the right direction. And I think that that's a very myopic view of what we actually do for a living. Most of what we do for a living is relationship building between the different people that we need to deal with, and that helps the mission by having people understand that we are all a part of a bigger ecosystem, especially as state agencies that require us to be at lockstep with our strategies, our IT strategies. And so for us,
Yeah,
it's a necessity for us to continue to be communicators among our peers, but also among the public.
I like it. So let's switch gears a little bit here. Phishing simulations. Um, I I know I have my opinions on why we run them, what the goal is, all of those things. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you run them? And if you do, what's the goal? And what maybe are some tactics or approaches you take?
Well, we do run them. We run them in conjunction with the Homeland Security, Arizona Homeland Security, and Department of Administration. So we don't run them solo. If we run them solo, we have two different reasons. We have a different reason for running them solo versus running them with quarterly with the other agency. I would say running them with Homeland Security and Department of Administration as a joint effort is more of a coordination between reactions to things. So, in other words, do we react the same way, or what is the process of reacting between communicating when something happens? So, like if someone clicks something, am I on the phone with who? Who am I on the phone with? Am I on the phone with the Department of Administration, or am I on the phone with Homeland Security? And then what is that process to remediate that, right? That's one of the reasons why we do it together. The reasons why we do it individually, as a part of an agency specific phishing, is to understand our employees, our individual employees. What are their weaknesses? And so our unique weaknesses, because obviously we are in the child welfare business, right? And so we have to understand where the weakness would happen if we had a very AI oriented phishing attack happen. And so that
Makes
we
sense.
could educate them and say, look, courts aren't usually going to say this, or a lawyer that's an opposing lawyer isn't going to contact you in this way. And so that's the reason why we do it independently versus the collaborative. They're both important, because if something happens, we do have to understand the proper procedure to make everybody in the state aware of it properly. But for us individually doing it, it's because we need to understand our employees so that we can properly educate them in the future.
Makes sense. I mean, I think there's a lot of really good KPIs that you can get from running phishing simulations. One of my favorite is just the report
Right.
rate. To me, I think the best indication of a culture is that report rate. Do I have 80% of my people reporting that fish back in? Do I have 10?
I would say that's the most important. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I agree, because that's how we measure
I,
culture. The, fish click rate and stuff like that, that helps us get an understanding of maybe who our weaker elements are, and where we're most likely to have the issues. But to me, I want to measure culture. I want to know that the initiatives I'm taking are actually working, and that overall I've got a really strong, resilient culture. And that's the reason, that's the metric that I focus on more than really any other metric. I mean, it's top 3. Well, that's number 1. I mean, I'd say Fish Click is still top 3, but it's number 3.
right. I agree with you 100%.
So, um, so what about fishing for training purposes? And let me premise this with a study that I saw. And what it said was that people that go through a phishing simulation, and learn their lesson as a result. So some sort of, good just in time training for them at the end of it. But then when people do that, they're over 70% less likely to fall for that same type of attack if they were to see it in the wild. Do you do any phishing, like, for purposes of just educating your people and sort of preparing them for that type of attack that they're going to see?
We do, and we try to mix it in with the phishing, the simulations within the normal phishing simulations. We try to throw in the things they see, on their home email. We see the banks sending them something, and we do it for the same reason, like I said before, was to see if there's a reaction between something that's personal versus work related phishing. Um, Surprisingly,
Yeah.
there's really not that much difference. That if someone falls for a phishing attack, personally, from a personal phishing attack, they usually within a 5% degree, they will fall for work stuff too. So kind of,
Oh, yeah, it amazes me that we still have people click on the
yeah, I mean, it's
Netflix
crazy.
app.
Yeah,
Because I would hope you don't have your Netflix account tied to your work email.
you'd hope.
Um, you do, we have another issue. Actually, no, our AI has it automatically. If you start clicking on personal business themed phishing attacks, you automatically get the education about not using your work email for personal things.
Right.
So I mean, there there is some element of that we already take or extrapolate from that rather. Um, well, cool. So we are running a little bit low on time here. Uh, but just before we wrap it up, do you have just any last bits of advice on driving that more secure culture, and just uh, empowering or motivating people to want to be more secure?
Well, I would say that you have just be aware that the cybersecurity is only as good as the person that's sitting in front of the mirror. And realize that if you're at home working versus working at the office, both areas you should be thinking about the same way, protecting your personal security as well as your work security is you should be thinking the same ways, because it's only you through you, not a cybersecurity team, that we can actually thwart many, many, many threats that we have at work and personal.
And personal and work cybersecurity are not or are not disconnected. They're very interrelated. If you bring your device in and it's compromised and you attach it to my network, I there's a very good chance that that malware is going to spread throughout the network as a result of that. And of course, vice versa, is if we've got terrible security on the network at work and you come and bring your clean device in, you could get it infected as a result.
100%,
So
100%.
I think it's important that users understand that. And I think too often they see them as very different, very
Right.
disconnected things. And helping them understand that, I think works. And the other part of the personal life, is that if they can connect their work cybersecurity to their
Yeah,
personal life, to me, I think it helps things make more sense. It helps make it more real.
I agree.
Um,
100%. I think that's the biggest takeaway from, I think, our meeting here, in my opinion, is that you should see no difference. The way you approach your personal privacy should be the same way you approach your work privacy.
yeah. And the other added benefit is if they go home and they start talking about cybersecurity to their children, they become the
Right?
expert at home, and all of a sudden we've got them in that right mindset.
100%.
So, all right. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us today for another episode of Fishing for
Thank you.
Answers. Have a great day.